Okay, so some of the benefits, well, again, we just listed 2. You can put any tag into Tag Manager and track that onto your website. And we know you can bypass your web developer or webmaster. And what it also does is it also allows you to test and deploy your JavaScript codes quicker. So remember, these JavaScript codes or snippets of codes are just there to track certain things on your website, whether that be a page view or somebody clicking on a play button or tracking somebody who converts or even just goes to your website. So the biggest benefit is you can take that snippet of code, let's just say Facebook. Let's just say you're doing Facebook marketing and you want to put that Facebook pixel on your website so that you could track people who come from Facebook and convert. Well, you don't need to put that Facebook pixel on your website. You can go right to Tag Manager and you can put that snippet of code right in Tag Manager really quickly. And the other benefit here is all tags are managed in one place. And that to me is really a good benefit, because when you start adding tags on your website and you have some tags in Tag Manager, it just gets very confusing. So ideally, all the tracking code you have on your website needs to be in Tag Manager. Think about that. All the tracking. So if you're doing Bing or you're doing Facebook or you're doing Twitter or you're doing LinkedIn and you're doing Google, you're doing all this type of marketing on all these different platforms, you're going to have tracking code for all these different platforms. And instead of putting all that code on your website, return going to slow down the load time of your web page and website. You want to put them all in Tag Manager so they can be organized and you know exactly what you're trying to track. And the other great benefit of Tag Manager is there's a versioning control. So let's just say you have added tags to your website via GTM for the last 6 months. Well, and let's just say you add another tag yesterday. If you added that tag yesterday and something doesn't work, well, you can just roll back to a previous version. It's that simple. So you have versioning, and that's a good thing. When you have versioning, you can control what gets published, and if something doesn't work after it gets published, then you can roll back to a previous version. So it's a peace of mind, so to speak. Just because you've added code to your site, there's no guarantee it's going to work. And so you can always control what version you're dealing with in Tag Manager. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the biggest benefit here to me with Tag Manager is you have event tracking. And so we talked about some of the things you could track on your website, from videos, from play buttons to somebody clicking on the stop on the video or pausing it, all the way to somebody, again, chatting, or let's just say somebody clicking on that purchase button on your website. Okay, and you want to track all these different things, these different interactivities and buttons. Well, event tracking is what you're going to use to track all those buttons. And to me, this is the biggest benefit of Tag Manager. And I'll show you some examples as we go along. And if we didn't mention it already, I'll mention it again. It is free. Tag Manager is free. There's no limit. So once you have Tag Manager going, you can add as many tracking codes as you want. There's no limit on the number of tracking codes you can add to Tag Manager. Okay, so it's free and you can use it to its fullest advantage. Okay, so it's also high security, meaning that it has different levels of permissions. Okay, so you can have somebody just go in and look at the different tags and tracking codes you have in GTM, or you can ask somebody who is very familiar with Tag Manager and can go in and add the tracking code to Tag Manager and then publish that tracking code when it gets added. So those are all the benefits. Let's talk about how it works now. Specifically, how does Tag Manager work? Because you're like, Rob, okay, again, a lot of jargon. You know, you got tags and JavaScript and versioning and publishing and all this other stuff. Well, I know I'm throwing a lot at you at once, but just bear with me here. Okay, so let's start talking about how it actually works. So you have a website, okay? Whatever that domain is, you have a website, and there's chances are on your website, you have some form of interactivity, whether that be a video, whether that be a blog, whether it be a form submission. You have a website with some interactivity. And let's just say you're even thinking about getting ready to launch some type of campaign on maybe Google or Facebook, and you want to drive traffic to your website. Fair enough. You're joining the millions of other websites that are out there that have interactivity that also drive traffic to the website. So in comes Google Tag Manager. And so Tag Manager is important because, again, we know we want to track people coming from that Facebook campaign or that Google campaign and interacting with our site. So if you are running Facebook and you are running Google Analytics? Well, guess what? You want to put that tracking code in Tag Manager. So Google Analytics, being a Google product, works very nicely with Tag Manager. Facebook has its own tracking code, but you still want to be able to track people who come from the Facebook campaign to your website. So you're going to get that tracking code from Facebook and put it in Tag Manager. That's generally how it works. So here, information from your website is shared with another data source through Tag Manager. So think about that. If I add Facebook tracking code to Tag Manager, or let's just say I add Google Analytics tracking code to Tag Manager is the one that's pushing out and doing all the heavy lifting. They're the ones that are controlling what code gets fired and what code doesn't. So if you're putting the code in Tag Manager is controlling the code. Think about it that way. And let's show you an example of what that looks like. So here I am, I'm in Tag Manager. I just went to tagmanager.google.com, and here I could see a list of tags. So in our conversation, we're talking about tracking Facebook and we're talking about tracking Google Analytics. Well, Google Analytics is easy because it's a Google product. So here, if I look at all the different tracking code I have on my website through Tag Manager, let's just take a look at Google Analytics. So if you're going to use Tag Manager, you might as well put the Google Analytics code in here. So here I can see I have Google Analytics as a tag in Tag Manager. Now, for Facebook, if I'm running a Facebook campaign, well, I can take that pixel tracking and put it in GTM as well. And here I can see Facebook pixel. That code is added to GTM. I just basically took what Facebook gave me and put it into Google Tag Manager. So you can see I can add Facebook and Google Analytics. And again, I can't stress it enough, any tracking code from any platform I can add to Google Tag Manager in order to track the behavior from those sources. So let's take a little bit deeper dive into how Tag Manager works. So I just showed you an example of how you could take Facebook and Google Analytics code and put it into Tag Manager. But if you're not familiar with Tag Manager, then how do I do that? Well, let's talk about the structure and how Tag Manager works. So when you have a Tag Manager account, you have a container. Remember, I mentioned toy box earlier. You have a bunch of toys. If they're code and you're tracking different bits of code from different platforms like Facebook, think of those as toys, and you have a toy box. Okay, well, that's what this code is, and that's what a container is. The code is the code, and that's going to go into the toy box or container. And so the way Tag Manager works is you have tags, triggers, and variables. So if I take my Facebook tracking code and put it into a container, I need to set up a tag and a trigger. Okay, so let's take a look at what that is. So first, if I go back to Tag Manager, I'm going to have an account, and if I have an account, I'm going to have a container. So here I'm just going to click on an account with a container, and a container is nothing more than what website you're adding the tracking code to. Okay, that's all the container is. We're just letting Tag Manager know this is the website we're adding all this code to. So you have tags, triggers, and variables. That's the structure of Tag Manager. So tags are just what it says, tags. What are we trying to quote unquote tag? Well, if it's Google Analytics, that's easy. Here I could see I have Google Analytics added. So if I click on Google Analytics, here's my tag. And if I take a little bit of a deeper dive there, since Google Analytics is a Google product, it integrates already with Tag Managers. It's pretty easy. I can just choose Google Analytics, then I'm going to check page view, and that's my tag. Now, every tag needs a trigger. Okay, so I need to tell Tag Manager how or when to fire the Google Analytics tracking code. So in this case, I'm going to tell Tag Manager to fire on all pages. So if I get somebody, a visitor to my website, Analytics is firing on all pages. So whatever page that visitor lands on, Google Analytics is going to fire. So that's really what it comes down to, is I have a tag and I need to tell Tag Manager when to trigger that tag. That's really what the structure of Tag Manager is. It's tags, triggers, and variables. And variables we're going to talk about here in a couple minutes. But you have a piece of code. You're going to go ahead and put that into Tag Manager. You're going to tag it, and then you're going to fire that trigger. So let's take a look at another example here. If I go back here, you can see Facebook. Well, here's my Facebook pixel. Okay, that's my tag. So when is it going to fire? Well, it's going to fire on a specific domain or subdomain. That's basically what we're doing. We're trying to tell GTM when to fire that particular tag. So those are the three main components: a tag, okay, which is going to contain the JavaScript code that you get from, say, Facebook, the trigger. So you're going to go into Tag Manager and tell Tag Manager when to fire that code. That's the trigger. And then you have variables. And so variables are basically just additional information that Tag Manager may need for your tag and trigger to work. So that's what a variable is. It's there to get the tag and trigger to fire. So variables are divided into built-in and user-defined variables. So common use variables include, say, page path or page URL or host name or click class. Again, they're there, and these examples I just gave you are there to get your tag and trigger to work. Think about it that way. That's a component. And if I go into Tag Manager here, and here on the left side, I can see variables. So remember, I have built-in and user-defined. So built-in means that Tag Manager already built these for me. So in case I need to get my trigger to work with my tag, I can use a variable. So those are built in, and then I have user defined. So these are what I define. These are what I created. And again, the variables are there to get the tag and trigger to work. Okay, so that's the job of the variable. The job of the tag is to host that JavaScript code. Okay, in the case of Facebook or analytics, that's where we're putting our code. So here, if I click on AdWords remarketing, again, it's a Google product, so I don't really need to even deal with code. I'm just going to select Google AdWords remarketing. Okay, so you can see GTM integrates nicely with some of the other Google products. But let's just say you have a Facebook pixel tracking code. You're going to choose custom, and you're going to put the code here. So that's part of the tag. And then the trigger, again, is there to get the tag to fire. So you're telling GTM when to fire the tag. And the variable is there to help you make sure that that trigger and that tag work together. So that's how all three kind of work together. You need the tag to put the code. You need the trigger to tell GTM when to fire the tag and code. And the variable's there to help you define when that tag and trigger should work or how it should work. So again, review, tags they're just small codes of JavaScript or tracking pixels on your website. And so tags are allowed to manage events like scroll tracking, remarketing, clicks, downloads, files, play buttons, you name it. Even clicks on external links. For example, let's just say you have a click or a Facebook icon on your site, and when somebody clicks on it, they go to Facebook. You want to maybe track that. You're going to create a tag. Okay? The trigger is there because you need to tell GTM when to fire that tag. So it's a certain condition, whether it's, fire the tag if the URL equals facebook.com or some other condition. So the tag cannot be created until the creation of the corresponding trigger. So tags and triggers go together. You can't just create a tag and not have a trigger. Otherwise, your tag will never fire. And then the variable is there again. It stores the information when defining a trigger or transferring data to tag. So a variable has a variety of data. Okay, so you pick and choose the variable you want to use with that trigger. Okay, so you're making sure that by defining a variable, you're making sure that you're telling GTM how that trigger should be fired. So let's take a look at another example here of how all three play together. If I'm in this account, I'm in this container. If I look down here, I can see Google Optimize. That's another Google product. So what I'm doing here is I just chose Google Optimize as my tag. It's already integrated. So what does that mean? I don't even need to deal with any code. I'm just going to select Optimize. Well, we have the tag Google Optimize, but we need to tell GTM how to fire that. And so here we're going to tell GTM to fire it on all pages. So that's basically a very simple example because we're firing it on all pages. So if I want to look at something specific again, Facebook, here's my tag, here's my code. What's my trigger? Well, my trigger is it's going to fire on specific pages. How do I know that? Well, if I look at the trigger, here I could see the trigger is a page view, but I'm telling it to fire on this particular host name. So the tag and trigger go hand in hand.